Hi guys, and welcome to my new series, Baking Basics with Skylar. You guys have been requesting for so long more in-depth videos that are step-by-step, and you also ask so often where to start if you don't know how to bake. In this series, I'm gonna be starting from scratch. We're gonna learn some baking fundamentals that I think are key to learning if you're gonna do more complex recipes. And even if you already bake, I'm gonna be sharing some tips and tricks along the way that I learned from many mistakes. I don't have any culinary experience. I've learned all of this from trial and error. And there's a lot that I've learned along the way that I want to share with you guys. So for this first recipe, we're gonna be learning how to bake a basic loaf of bread. As you can see, I already have all my ingredients weighed out. This is called mise en place. This basically translates to putting in place or gathering all of your materials. So what I do before I bake is I always weigh out or measure the ingredients prior. And the reason for this is because it makes the process so much easier and way less stressful. A lot of you guys say too that baking is not enjoyable for you and you find it stressful. This is a way to really make the process super enjoyable and more organized. So I already took the time to measure everything out. In this bowl, I have 2 cups of all-purpose flour, 2 cups of whole wheat flour, and 1 teaspoon of salt. I use 2 cups of whole wheat flour additional to the 2 cups of all-purpose flour because I like the taste that it adds, but you can 100% just use all-purpose flour if that's all that you have. I have 2 cups of water over here, and the first thing that I want to do is bloom my yeast. Now there are 2 different types of yeast that people use in recipes. There's instant yeast, and then there's active dry yeast. Instant yeast is a type of yeast that you can add directly into your recipe without having to bloom it or activate it in warm water. This is active dry yeast. I need to bloom this in my water because currently this is dormant. So this needs to be added to warm water to activate it. This also is a great way to check if your yeast is dead or not. I have never encountered dead yeast. It's really, really rare, but it's a possibility, so it's really good to check it first. You want your water to be warm, around 100 to 110 degrees, but not hotter. You can kill off your yeast if it's hotter than that. So what I do is I just do the finger dip test. I make sure that it's warm enough to where it's not burning me, but it's comfortably warm. And then I'll add my yeast to it. And I also add a little dash of honey. Yeast loves sugar. This really, really helps it to bloom effectively. So we're gonna mix this and let this sit for 10 to 15 minutes. In this 10 to 15 minutes, it's gonna start to get super frothy. And frothy is such a great sign. That means that your yeast is active and it bloomed. Okay, our yeast is bloomed, so now all we have to do is just throw all of these ingredients into our bowl and then mix it until we have a shaggy dough, and I'll show you what that looks like. Adding the active dry yeast mixture, adding a 1/4 cup of honey, and 2 tablespoons of any neutral oil. I'm using avocado oil. You can also use vegetable oil or canola oil. And now I'm just mixing this until I have a shaggy dough come together. This recipe actually calls for about 5 cups of flour. I only added 4 cups of flour to this bowl. The reason that I did that is because you can always add more flour. You can't take away. If you put too much in there at first, it's gonna get super tough and it's hard to add any moisture. But adding flour to a shaggy, very wet dough is a lot easier. Okay, so I can already tell that this dough is too wet. If we knead this on the counter right now, it is just gonna be a sticky, wet mess. So I'm gonna add some all-purpose flour until it comes together into less of a super wet dough and something that we could work with on the counter. Okay, and I'm happy with that. I think we can work with that on the counter. It's still got some dry spots, but it's not sticking to the bowl and it's easier to work with. So let's dump this onto the counter. This part's gonna get a little messy. I actually do prefer to do this in a KitchenAid, but I do know that not everyone has a KitchenAid, so I'm gonna show you how to do it by hand. It's really attainable this way too. It's gonna take about 7 minutes by hand versus like 5 minutes in the KitchenAid. So I already know I'm gonna need some more flour to knead this out. So let's add some more here. And not too much, we can keep some on the side. First, I'm gonna get it workable to where it's not sticking to my hands. And this is the kneading technique I like to do. I like to pull with one hand, drag it over, push with my right hand. So you can see here, my hands are already getting sticky. I don't want this. This is when it's time to add more flour. So really easy, just add more flour when it gets sticky and starts grabbing onto your hands. And I'm just gonna continue for about 5 minutes with this same motion, pulling with my left hand, folding the dough over itself, pressing into the dough, and I'm adding more flour as I need. We know we're done kneading when the dough is smooth, it's not super tacky, and it's more elastic. I'm out of breath. Okay, so I ended up kneading for about 6 minutes, and I ended up adding almost the full amount of the 5 cups of flour. So let's check in with this dough and see some indicators that I know this is done kneading. First of all, when I'm touching this dough, my fingers are not sticking and no dough is pulling off onto my hands. Second, this dough is tacky. It's not dry, but it's also not super sticky. And if I pull onto this dough, it has more of a stretch before it breaks. So now we are ready to let this dough rise. This is gonna be our first proof. A lot of recipes will tell you to go get a clean bowl for your rise. It's not necessary, just get the bowl that you just used. Here's the bowl that I just used. Before putting the dough in there, I'm gonna grease the bowl. And I'm gonna pick up this dough and I'm gonna let gravity work for me. I'm gonna let the dough shape itself into a ball. I'm pulling the edges and then pulling them together. I have a smooth bottom, place that seam side down into the bowl. Now we have a beautiful dough that's ready to rise at room temperature, but here are some notes to make sure that your dough is gonna proof effectively. You want your environment to not be too cold. Your dough is gonna take way longer to proof. A way that you could troubleshoot this, especially in winter, is to turn on your oven for about 10 seconds and then turn it off. This is gonna create the ideal proofing environment for your dough. And that perfect temperature is anywhere from 80 to about 95 degrees. 95 is a little bit on the hotter side. Your dough is gonna take about an hour or hour and a half to proof, but keep your eye on it. A really good indicator to use is to take a picture of your dough before you put it in the proofing drawer or you put it to the side, and to monitor how your dough grows. You want it to double in size. You can also draw a line on the outside of your bowl with a dry erase marker to make an indicator of where your dough started so you could see where it doubled in size. While you're building your baking experience, it's really good to have visual cues to help yourself out. So I'm gonna go put this in the oven. My oven is about 80 degrees right now, and let this proof for about an hour to an hour and a half. You can cover this with plastic wrap or a damp towel, but just make sure you cover it or else the dough is gonna get a dry skin on it and the outcome isn't gonna come out as good. To the oven it goes. Okay, so this rose for a little less than an hour. Let's check our indicators to make sure that our dough has rised properly. That line that I made with the dry erase marker, it's definitely shown me that my dough has doubled in size. And I've compared my pictures, it definitely shows that the dough has doubled in growth. Now it is time to shape and do our second rise. This recipe makes 2 loaves, so I've already greased 2 9x5 loaf pans. And now's the fun part to let out your aggression. Punch the dough down and put onto your surface again. And now you're gonna divide it. You can just eyeball it. It doesn't have to be perfect. And I like to shape it into a rough ball. Same thing over here. Using gravity again to my advantage. Then using that pulling motion to make the top of the dough nice and tall. I have 2 beautiful circles of dough. Now I'm just gonna make them into more of a log. You do this by rolling, pulling. Now the second rise is the same exact thing, but a little bit of a shorter amount of time. It's gonna be about 45 minutes. Make sure to watch it. You want it to double in size. Put it in a warm place, covered with a damp towel or plastic wrap. I'm so excited for warm bread. Our loaves have doubled in size. About 10 minutes before they were done, I pulled them out of the oven and preheated it to 350. I'm gonna bake them for about 30 minutes or until the center is about 190 degrees. In the meantime, I'm gonna get some butter softened up so we have some to put on our bread. Oh my gosh, if only you could smell the house right now. It smells incredible. I know it's very tempting to want to cut into your hot, fresh loaf of bread, but let it sit for about 5 minutes. If you cut into it too soon, the inside's gonna get really doughy. So wait that 5 minutes, I promise it'll still be warm. I used a nonstick pan and I greased it really well, so it should just pop right out. It's the moment we've been waiting for. The bread has been cooling for 5 minutes. Now's the perfect time to slice into it. They're good for about 3 to 5 days if they're in the kitchen in an airtight container. But my favorite thing to do is to freeze them sliced, because then you could just pull out a slice, throw it in the toaster, and then you have bread ready to go. They last forever in the freezer too. Make sure you have a sharp bread knife and just slice it at the thickness that you like. I mean, the interior is perfect. It's steaming, and look at all those beautiful air pockets. I mean, oh my goodness, this is gonna be delicious. All right, I'm gonna take the end piece and try it. I have some butter at room temperature so it's nice and soft and spreadable for the bread. All right, the moment of truth, let's try it. There's not much better than warm, fresh bread with butter. So amazing. I hope you guys love this recipe and try it at home. I promise you can achieve this basic loaf of bread. Comment down below if you have any questions throughout the process. I'd love to help you troubleshoot any problems you might have. But if you follow the tips that I gave you in this video, I truly believe that you can accomplish this. Let me know any other suggestions that you guys have for my Baking Basics series, and I'll see you guys next week for episode 2.